I couldn't say a single sentence. Not one. Not, "Hello, how are you?" Not, "What is your name?" Nothing. I was sitting in that room surrounded by people who were speaking English, laughing, talking, sharing ideas, and I was just silent, like a ghost, present but invisible. That was the moment I realized I had to change something, or I would spend the rest of my life watching from the outside. This is the story of how I started learning English from absolute zero. And trust me, if you've ever felt embarrassed about your English, if you've ever stayed quiet in a room because you were afraid to speak, this one is for you. Let me take you back to where it all began. I grew up in a small town. English wasn't something we used every day. It was this distant, almost foreign thing, something we memorized for exams, something we feared in job interviews, something that made us feel less than others when we couldn't speak it fluently. At school, I passed my English exams. I could write grammar answers. I could fill in the blanks. But speak? Actually open my mouth and form a sentence in front of a real person? That was a completely different story. I remember the first time I tried to speak English outside of a classroom. I was applying for a job. The interviewer asked me a simple question. "Tell me about yourself." Simple, right? I had prepared that answer 100 times in my head, but the moment he looked at me and waited, my mind went completely blank. The words I had practiced for days just disappeared. I could feel my face getting hot. My hands started shaking slightly, and what came out of my mouth was broken, scattered, painful. I didn't get the job. I told myself it wasn't because of my English. I told myself it was something else. But deep down, I knew the truth. After that, I started noticing it everywhere. Every time there was a chance to speak English, in a meeting, in a group, with a foreigner, I would shrink. I would find a reason to stay quiet. I would let someone else speak. I became an expert at avoiding situations where I had to use English. And you know, it's funny. The more I avoided it, the more afraid I became. The fear grew bigger every single day. There's a special kind of loneliness in knowing what you want to say, but not being able to say it. It's like being locked in a glass box. You can see everything, but you can't reach out. That's where I was, for years. Then one evening, something happened that changed everything. I was watching a video online, just randomly scrolling, and I came across a man, an ordinary man, not a celebrity, not someone famous, just a regular person from a background similar to mine, and he was speaking English, clearly, confidently, beautifully. I stopped scrolling. I watched the whole video twice, 3 times. And then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I cried. Not because I was sad, but because something inside me cracked open. A wall that I had built, this belief that people like me just don't speak English well, it started to break. I remember thinking to myself, if he can do it, why can't I? That question changed my life. The next morning, I woke up early, earlier than usual, and I made a decision. I was going to start learning English, for real this time. Not for an exam, not to impress anyone, but for myself. And I was going to start from zero, completely from zero. No shame, no ego, just a decision to begin. I opened a free app on my phone. I started with the basics, things I thought were embarrassing to learn because they felt too simple. The alphabet sounds, basic sentence structures, how to introduce yourself without falling apart. I felt ridiculous at first. Here I was, almost an adult, learning things that children learn. But I kept going, because I had decided. The first few weeks were hard, really hard. I would practice speaking in front of my mirror every single day. And every single day, I would cringe at the sound of my own voice. My accent felt wrong. My sentences felt broken. I made mistakes constantly. But here's what I learned. Mistakes are not the enemy. Silence is the enemy. Every mistake I made was a step forward. Every embarrassing moment was practice. Every time I stumbled over a word, I was actually building something, a muscle, a skill, a new version of myself. I started listening to English podcasts while I cooked, while I walked, while I sat on the bus. I wasn't trying to understand everything. I just wanted my ears to get comfortable with the sound of the language. I wanted English to feel familiar, not foreign. I found a conversation partner online. We would talk for 30 minutes every week. The first conversation was painful. I spoke slowly. I paused too long. I apologized too many times. But my partner was patient. And by the third week, something shifted. I started to enjoy it. That's the thing nobody tells you about learning a language. At some point, if you keep going, it stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like a discovery. You discover a new way to express yourself. You discover that your thoughts, your ideas, your feelings, they can exist in another language too. And there's something deeply freeing about that. I started reading simple English books. I started watching English shows with subtitles. And slowly, very slowly, the world began to open up. I got another job interview. Different company, same question. Tell me about yourself. This time I answered. Not perfectly, but I answered. With real sentences, with real thoughts, with a voice that didn't shake. I didn't get that job either, but I wasn't broken by it, because I knew I was getting better. Every single day, I was getting better.